Deep in a magical forest lived two wolves, Jack and Hector. They were not just any wolves, they were known throughout the forest for their cunning and strength. They were brothers, but they were also very greedy. Despite their bond, their greed often got the better of them, leading to many arguments and fights. One sunny day, they found a bright red apple. It was the juiciest, most delicious-looking apple they had ever seen. "It's mine!" shouted Jack, his eyes gleaming with desire. "No, mine!" yelled Hector, equally determined to have it. They growled and snarled, each one wanting the apple for himself. The forest echoed with their fierce growls, and the other animals watched from a distance, afraid to intervene. "There's no way I'm sharing!" Jack declared, his voice filled with stubbornness. He could already taste the sweet apple in his mouth. He snatched the apple and ran as fast as his legs could carry him, weaving through the trees with incredible speed. Hector, furious, chased after him. His anger fueled his speed, and he was determined not to let Jack get away with the apple. They raced through the trees, their greed making them blind to everything else. The forest seemed to blur around them as they focused solely on the apple. Little did they know, a clever goat with curly horns was watching them. The goat had seen many such arguments and knew how they usually ended. The goat smiled, knowing something the wolves didn't. He had a plan to teach them a lesson about greed and sharing. As the wolves continued their chase, the goat quietly followed, waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. The goat, whose name was Billy, was known throughout the forest for his clever tricks. He had a reputation for being the smartest and most cunning animal in the entire woodland. His friends admired him, and even those who didn't like him had to admit that Billy was a force to be reckoned with. One day, as Billy was wandering through the forest, he saw the wolves fighting and decided to teach them a lesson. The wolves, Jack and Hector, were always causing trouble, and Billy thought it was high time someone put an end to their constant bickering. "Hey, you two!" he called out, his voice echoing through the trees. The other animals in the forest paused to see what Billy was up to this time. Jack and Hector stopped running, surprised to see Billy standing there with a confident grin on his face. They had been so engrossed in their fight that they hadn't noticed him approaching. "What do you want?" growled Jack, baring his teeth. He was always the more aggressive of the two, and he didn't like being interrupted. "I couldn't help but notice your little argument," said Billy, his eyes twinkling with mischief. He knew exactly how to handle the situation, and was already formulating a plan in his mind. "You know, there's a much bigger and juicier apple just over that hill," he continued, pointing with his hoof. The apple tree was known to be the best in the forest, and Billy knew it would be irresistible to the wolves. Jack and Hector forgot their fight, their mouths watering at the thought of a bigger apple. They had been fighting over a small half-eaten apple, and the idea of a fresh, juicy one was too tempting to resist. "Really?" asked Hector, his tail wagging hopefully. He was always the more gullible of the two, and Billy knew he could easily be swayed by the promise of food. "Follow me," Billy called, and he trotted off towards the hill. Jack and Hector, forgetting all about their fight, eagerly followed behind. Billy led them on a merry chase through fields of wildflowers and across babbling brooks. The wolves, blinded by their desire for the apple, didn't even notice where they were going. They climbed over rocks, pushed through bushes, and even splashed through a muddy puddle, all with the image of that giant apple in their minds. Billy, nimble and quick, easily stayed ahead, a sly grin on his face. Finally, they reached the top of the hill. The view was breathtaking, with the forest stretching out endlessly before them. "Here it is!" shouted Billy, pointing to a clump of trees. His eyes sparkled with excitement, convinced that their treasure was just within reach. Jack and Hector rushed towards the trees, pushing and shoving each other. Their hearts pounded with anticipation, each step bringing them closer to what they believed was a hidden fortune. "Out of my way!" yelled Jack. His voice echoed through the forest, filled with urgency and desperation. "I saw it first!" roared Hector. His face was red with frustration, determined not to let Jack get ahead. They barged through the trees, expecting to find the biggest, juiciest apple they had ever seen. Their imaginations ran wild, picturing the apple as large as a pumpkin glistening in the sunlight. But there was no apple. Instead, they found themselves facing a thick wall of thorny vines. Confusion and disappointment washed over them as they realized something was terribly wrong. The vines sprang to life, wrapping around the wolves' legs and tying them together. They had been tricked. Panic set in as they struggled to free themselves, but the more they fought, the tighter the vines became. Their greed had led them into a trap, and now they were paying the price. The forest seemed to mock them, whispering secrets of their folly. They had come seeking treasure, but all they found was a lesson in humility and the consequences of their own greed. The wolves struggled against the vines, but the more they pulled, the tighter the vines squeezed. "Let us go," howled Jack. "This isn't funny," snarled Hector. Just then, they heard a gentle laugh. A beautiful girl with long, flowing hair stepped out from behind a tree. She wore a sparkling dress, and on her head sat a golden crown. It was Princess Amara. "This is my garden," she said, her voice as sweet as birdsong, "and these vines protect it from greedy creatures." Princess Amara explained that a kind witch had given her the magical vines to protect her precious garden from harm. "The witch told me that only those with kind hearts and a willingness to share can enter my garden," she said. "Greed and selfishness will only lead to trouble." Jack and Hector hung their heads in shame. They realized that their greed had led them into a trap. "We're sorry, Princess Amara," mumbled Jack. "We were just so focused on the apple that we didn't think about anyone else," added Hector. Princess Amara, seeing the remorse in their eyes, decided to give them a chance. "There is a way to free yourselves," she said, "but it will require you to work together." She pointed to a sparkling stream that flowed through the garden. At the bottom of that stream lies a magical golden key. If you both work together, you can retrieve the key and unlock the vines. Jack and Hector looked at each other. They had never worked together before, always competing for everything, but they were desperate to be free. "Okay," said Jack, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." They carefully lowered themselves into the stream, the cool water soothing their scratched paws. The current was strong, but by working together, they managed to stay afloat. Jack used his sharp claws to dig into the stream bed, while Hector used his powerful legs to push away rocks. Finally, Jack felt something hard and metallic. He carefully dug it out. It was the magical golden key. Together, they swam back to the bank and used the key to unlock the vines. Princess Amara was impressed by their teamwork. "You see," she said, smiling, "when you work together, you can achieve anything." She led them to a beautiful apple tree, its branches laden with ripe red apples. "Please," she said, "share these apples as a symbol of your newfound cooperation." Jack and Hector looked at each other, a new understanding in their eyes. They each took an apple and shared a bite. It was the tastiest apple they had ever eaten, made even sweeter by their shared accomplishment. From that day forward, Jack and Hector were different wolves. They had learned that greed and selfishness only led to trouble, while cooperation and kindness brought joy and reward. They became the best of friends, sharing their food and helping others in need. The forest animals were amazed by their transformation. They had never seen such a positive change in anyone before. Jack and Hector's story became a legend, a reminder that even the greediest of creatures can learn the value of kindness and cooperation. And so, the tale of Jack and Hector, the two greedy wolves, became a bedtime story told throughout the magical forest, reminding everyone that true happiness lies in sharing, caring, and working together. Remember, little ones, even when we face challenges, kindness and cooperation can help us overcome them and discover the magic within ourselves and others. Now, close your eyes and dream of a world filled with kindness, where even wolves can be friends. Sweet dreams.